Hi everyone. In this video I'm going to show and talk through the mechanics of when you enter into a new zone. And in this example here, this mock-up here, I've got some printouts of the tables that we'll need. I've got the game board. I've just put these here just for the sake of the video. You'd actually probably have them off the actual board itself. Got my 4 planes here and they have taken off successfully. They have formed up successfully, and they are now into a new zone, zone 1. And I'll talk through the steps you need to go through when you enter a new zone. Firstly, and this is only for zone 1, you will establish the weather conditions for the sortie. And it's either good weather or bad. You roll your 2 dice and refer to the results. 2 to 7, good. 8 to 12, bad. Now there is a modifier. If the takeoff was in bad weather, then you will add +3 to the die result. So there's a good chance if in bad weather on takeoff, the bad weather continues throughout the whole sortie. And the table itself illustrates that modifier as well as illustrating the results. But let's, for the sake of argument, assume that we're in good weather. Let's just put that counter there. You can place that wherever you wish. You don't need a counter for that. I use it as a visual aid. The next thing you're going to do is you will look at the zone events table, which is the table below. And again, as I've said, these are mock-ups. These are prototypes. I may change some of the content of the table. So if there's anything in this video that contradicts the rulebook, the rulebook is the winner. So, and if there is a few things, I'll probably redo this video at some point. So anyway, the zone events table. So you can roll 2 dice and check to see the results. The results are either there's no event, enemies present, or a hazard. And you're going to roll on this table per plane. So let's say, for example, plane number 1, no event. Plane number 2, no event. Plane number 3 rolls though and gets enemies present. And plane number 4, a hazard. So now we'll have a look at how you resolve those. Let's do the hazard first. So on the hazard table, you'll be directed depending on the results of the previous table. But if you did roll for a hazard, you will refer to this table here and you'll roll on here. There is a modifier, so if they're bad weather, we're in good, it's okay. But if it was bad weather, there'd be a +1 to the die results. The results are either a lucky near miss, no problem, damage, and severe damage. So in hazards, there are lots of accounts of planes hitting trees. They're flying low as they're approaching their target. So there's a variety of different hazards that they may encounter, the pilots may encounter, and there's quite a few accounts of pilots, unfortunately, crashing because they're flying, simply because they're flying so low. So the results of these are basically either it's a lucky near miss, so you get, even if you get a hazard, there is a chance you just get a miss, you know, a cat's whisker of a miss, but there can be a result in damage or severe damage. Both of those two things you're going to roll on the P47 damage table. I'm not going to go into that today in this video, sorry. I will talk about that in the combat video. So how you work out what damage a plane has encountered as a result of either a hazard or enemy fire, it's all the same, we'll refer to that. Now if you roll the result of enemies present, then you will be referring to this table just here, and that will tell you what enemies there are. It could be a false alarm. Often pilots would see what they thought was an enemy, and you know, closer inspection or just looking again, realise actually no, it's not a tank, it's a truck, for example, or a farm vehicle or something like that, or a civilian vehicle. And occasionally I have read they would strafe those such things just in case, but for this result, it's a no enemies result. Then there are enemy aircraft, enemy ground forces, and the final result is enemy aircraft and ground forces. And there are counters. I'm just going to reach over the table and grab a couple here. that you would put on the board to represent those. So for example, let's say this plane here, I think this was the one I said, rolled enemy forces, you roll on this table, and let's say they get a ground forces, or they could have got a enemy aircraft. There we go. And that will determine, you'll then go to the combat phase. But once you've been through all these, put all the counters, then that is that. Now, once you've worked out what type of enemy are in the zone, you'll then roll to see on these tables here how many there are. So it's either 1 or 2. So for example, let's say we had ground forces on the previous table, then you would refer to this table here and roll to see how many there are. And let's say there's 2. So then we'll place 2 enemy ground forces counters in that zone. So when you come to do combat, you've worked out if there are enemy combatants in the zone and how many there are in the zone. And the last table here is the combined forces. So if you were particularly lucky or unlucky, depends how you look at it, you may encounter 2 enemy ground forces and an enemy aircraft, for example, and you can put these counters here to represent that, so that when you come to do the combat phase, you'll know. Now it is possible, let's use a different example, that you may have, several planes may have encountered enemies within the new zone in which they are in. And when you come to do the next phase, which will be combat, you can use these counters to remind you what the results of those tables are. And once combat's been resolved, you'll move into the next zone, providing they were all successful and none of them have been removed from the gaming board. If that is the case, move into the next zone. Let's say we've finished combat, and there's a separate video detailing combat. If you move into the next zone, for example, you'll go through that process again. However, you do not need to roll for the weather. The weather is set. You'll simply roll to see what type of event you encounter in the next zone. And often by I'll refer back to the zone events table. Often when you're going into a new zone, there's if you're on a 2d6, 2 to 6 result is no event. So you'll be rolling these quite quickly for each plane. I think 3, no event. The next one, for example, we got a 10, enemies present. So then we would then refer to the enemies present, what types of enemies, and roll to see what they were. This one, for example, 5, no event. And at 7, enemies present. So enemies here and here. I would then refer to those tables to determine what enemies are present in those zones. And it's as straightforward as that. It's as simple as that. Just a couple of die rolls to see what events are happening. If there are enemies or hazards, then you'll follow through the different tables effectively. And what this does is, although my intention as the designer is to start to create that narrative in your mind of, you can imagine the planes flying low, ducking and weaving as they're flying. They may clip a tree and you get a result of, just a near miss, no problem, or they may collide with under the taller structure or something like that. They may be bounced by an enemy fighter plane. That's why they've encountered an enemy fighter plane, and so forth. So hopefully that gives you some understanding of how the mechanics work for when you enter a new zone. It is one of the key parts of the game, just those quite straightforward die rolling and referring to tables. Combat, which I'll feature in a separate video. In combat, that's where there's a lot more mechanics involved, and that push your luck mechanic that I've designed for this game. So please have a look at that as well. And the other videos, so videos for how to take off and how to destroy the objectives and so forth. But hopefully that gives you some insight into how this part of the game works. And thank you for watching as ever. If you do have any questions, please either contact me directly or pop a comment on either the YouTube video itself or the other various social media channels that I use, and I'll give an answer. No problem at all. And yeah, thanks again. Thank you.